When you think of a metaphor, you probably think of poetry or music or something that is flamboyant and beautiful. But what if I told you that most of your conceptual system is actually metaphoric in nature? Metaphors are subject to the stereotype that they are deep and difficult to utilize if you are not a gifted user of language, like a writer, a poet, or a lyricist. But this idea could not be further from the truth. A metaphor is simply a way of looking at something in terms of something else. Metaphors are the string tying our everyday lives together. A metaphor carries the power with it to view the world in a very unique way, a figurative way. In their popular book, Metaphors We Live By, George Lakoff and Mark Johnson explore the conceptual metaphors that make up our everyday life. One of these important metaphors is the idea that time is money. You might be a little bit confused at this point. How does time is money find its way into your everyday life? Well, if you think about it, you constantly rush around because you do not want to waste time. You invest time into relationships, hobbies, and even your career. Time is monetized through hourly wages and hotel rates. Even convicts pay their debts to society by serving time. But what does this have to do with you, the average, everyday user of language? Yes, maybe now you can see that time is money and that metaphor is deeply entrenched in your everyday life. But what does this have to do with your day-to-day activities? Well, if we take a step back, time is an abstract concept with no real currency. So, in order to see time as a valuable commodity, we have chosen to view it as money. We live our whole lives terrified of wasting time, because time is this incredibly valuable commodity. But what we need to start realizing is that time is money is simply a construct. And if it is a construct, we have the power to deconstruct it and reimagine it. I am a firm believer in the power of language. The words that we use matter. If we are speaking about things, if we are using those words, our actions will inevitably follow suit. Notice the metaphor. To use another metaphor to expand on this, let's view our behavior as a pyramid. Right at the bottom of this pyramid are our thoughts. We then put these thoughts together to form sentences. And in order to help us make sense of these, we look at them through the lens, notice the metaphor, of other thoughts. As we move up the pyramid, our thoughts become more concrete and tangible until right at the very top, they translate, notice the metaphor, into actions. So my thinking is that if we restructure our thought process right at the very bottom of the pyramid, we will see real life changes in our actions. Our frame of reference should constantly be monitored by ourselves. We should constantly be checking in with the figurative lenses through which we are seeing the world. Let us turn our attention now to the global COVID-19 pandemic. What are the metaphors we are using to approach it? One of the most popular metaphors that comes up in relation to the pandemic is that of war. We send our essential workers to the front lines, we must wear a mask so that we are heroes, and COVID-19 is framed as the enemy. War metaphors tend to be society's go-to metaphor in times of crises. This is because they play on a well-known conceptualization that is easily accessible to a large amount of people. But what does this insinuate? For starters, it insinuates that there is a battle to be won. It expands on this by alluding to violent and forceful imagery, meaning that we think the only way to overcome a pandemic is through force. But is forcefully overcoming a pandemic truly the way to go? A pandemic is not a simple good side versus bad side affair, and in my opinion, using a war metaphor to describe it is oversimplifying the complexity of the situation. I've given it a lot of thought, and I am uncertain of a perfect metaphor for the COVID-19 pandemic. Other metaphors that come up a lot are those of floods or storms. And while these capture that unpredictability of a pandemic, they miss out on our agency to prepare for it, thus leaving us with an approach of helplessness, which is also not helpful. We need to constantly be reevaluating the figurative lenses through which we are choosing to see the world. It is crucial that we find a balance between figurative approaches of unpredictability and agency. To reiterate, the way that we figuratively view the world will inevitably shape our actions and our attitudes in dealing with something as daunting as a pandemic. So, we must constantly be unveiling these figurative lenses through which we are seeing the world. Are we adopting a view because we truly believe it? Or are we unknowingly adopting the conceptualization of someone else? Actions have their roots in ideas. And if we are to truly move forward as a society, we need to start at the roots. The way that we think and the way that we speak about the pandemic will inevitably shape the actions we take in dealing with it and the effects of it. We give power to what we focus on. In the words of Stephen Richards, you are who you create yourself to be. So, if we are to be socially responsible, active citizens, we need to constantly be aware of the figurative lenses through which we are seeing the world. There is no perfect metaphor, but there are many imperfect ones. It is our duty to constantly be aware of them, reevaluate them, and improve them, because if left unchecked, they can paint a rather problematic view of the world. Language matters. The metaphors that you use are powerful. So be a responsible language user, but more specifically, be a responsible figurative language user.